Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. I can introduce myself first. My name is Maeve Larson. I'm one of Luke's interns this year with Applied Linguistics Press. I'm a senior currently at NAU, and I'm studying English and journalism. And Abby, if you'd like to introduce yourself too.
Yeah, I'm another intern with Applied Linguistics Press. I'm also a senior and I'm studying linguistics.
Awesome. And to get us started here, can you each tell us your name, your program affiliation, and a little bit about your research interests within the field of applied linguistics? And we can start with you, Scott, and then to Kate and Luke.
Sure. My name is Dr. Scott Sterling. I'm a professor of TESOL and linguistics at Indiana State University. My main area of research interest is in second language acquisition and in particular in meta research, mostly focusing on research ethics and community engagement and all that kind of fun stuff.
My name is Kate Yaw, and I am an assistant professor of applied linguistics at the University of South Florida. My research focuses sort of in two main areas. One is on the perception and production of second language speech, especially when we listen to second language speech, how our brains process that, and what we sort of do maybe to be better communication partners as listeners. My other area of interest, though, and what brings us together today is quantitative research ethics. So,
Okay, and I'm Luke Plonsky. I'm a faculty member in the Applied Linguistics program at Northern Arizona University, and I do research on second language acquisition, a lot of different areas within that field, and then also within, I do a lot of work on research methodology, meta research, open science, research ethics, and so forth.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And okay, I guess we'll jump right into the questions now. So my first one that I have for you lot is, what was the motivation for writing this book addressing questionable research practices in applied linguistics, a practical guide? And was there a particular moment when you realized a resource like this was needed?
I could start on this one. I'll just say, this book was part of a larger project with really three phases, and this third phase seemed as like a really natural progression from the first two. The first one was to sort of catalog a list of questionable, not unethical, but just questionable research practices that we encounter in the process of conducting applied linguistics research, specifically and mostly quantitative research. And then the second phase was to assess or estimate the frequency and the perceived severity of those questionable research practices or QRPs. And then the third phase of this, which is what the focus of the book was to try and take what we learned and provide educational materials for applied linguistics, graduate students especially, but anybody interested in sort of understanding and doing more mentoring or training on how to best approach and understand and deal with the questionable research practices that we all encounter.
Awesome. Thanks for explaining that. Kate and Scott, is there anything else you guys want to add too, or?
Yeah, Kate, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say that it kind of built off another part of another sort of mini project that we did where we were looking at existing training materials for graduate students and like coursework for research methods in applied linguistics. And so we had gone into that already planning to make these training materials, but I think going through the process of actually looking at textbooks that are out there and seeing how research ethics is discussed and how questionable research practices are or aren't really discussed along the way, just reinforced for us that it was a good opportunity to be able to get these training materials out there so that people who are teaching research methods courses in the future, could incorporate these into their classes if they found it useful.
Yeah, as a group, we'd been meeting about every week, every other week or so for several years at this point in the project. And I think in some of our discussions, we were also just talking about how do we want to teach these sorts of things and kind of wishing that we had these materials as well. And we kind of felt that, if we were thinking that as we're doing these sort of projects, then creating them for not just us to use, but for everyone to use through the press would be a really good usage of our time and hopefully other people's as well.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I forgot to preface in the saying in the beginning too, but there were six authors on this book, three of which aren't here today. But kind of along with that, having so many perspectives together, I was wondering how did the collaboration with all six of you come together, and how did you divide the work and perspectives across chapters?
Remember?
I mean, if you want the origin story, I think that would be Luke, right? You were there.
Yeah. How did that come together? Well, the we had in in that we have in that book some sort of part of the idea is to go through each of the QRPs, the questionable research practices, and help explain them. And we do that both in little prose chunks. We also do that in terms of by means of little 1 minute TikTok style videos. And so that those prose descriptions, and then also we wrote up little scenarios based on all the QRPs to help kind of bring the QRPs to life and illustrate how they might take place in real life. And so for those, I think what we did was we pretty much divided them across the group. Another main component of the book was developing like actual lesson plans and syllabi and materials that teachers of research methods who want to do like a whole, whether you want to do like a whole course or whether you want to do just one class session or whether you do like maybe a 2 or 3 week session on research ethics in your research methods course or on a professional development course that you could help address and pick and choose. Kind of, we wanted to make it so readers or users who are essentially teachers and students could sort of customize the materials to whatever was useful fit for their particular goals and curricular constraints and interests.
Yeah, I think too, we kind of divided up just kind of by interest area, like kind of had a whole list of different things that people could work on. And I think we all just kind of chose the ones that we were the most excited about, which wasn't that hard because I mean, most of the
Yeah.
topic is really interesting to all of us. So,
Yeah, and I think as Scott had mentioned, like the way that this research group functions is already very collaborative. So like we meet weekly or every other week. We've been doing that for several years now. And so this was kind of an opportunity to like take a lot of the conversations that we had been having over a couple of years and sort of put this into something more concrete. But it also, with these regular meetings, it gave us the opportunity to check in and see, if like we had ideas for, maybe we should do some scenarios. I think some of that was built off of some of Scott's previous work. Um, just looking at research ethics but through the lens of scenarios, which I think has been quite effective actually. But so we were able to kind of build off of each other's experiences, bounce ideas off of each other, go kind of work on our own pieces, bring it back together, and evaluate sort of how it looked as a final product.
That's really cool. I think that's the best way to get it to happen is everyone being inspired and motivated by their own personal interests, which I mean, everyone overlap. And so that's just really great to hear. It was so smooth throughout the process. But yeah, many questionable research practices occur unintentionally. How do you think researchers can create environments where people feel safe to acknowledge and correct mistakes without stigma?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that we have been working on internally as we've gone through this whole process of thinking about questionable research practices and moving into the book and then post writing the book as well is a sort of a shift in our mindset of looking at QRPs as if they are negative things into more of how you just kind of describe them as they are just researcher decisions. They are situations that come up and you have to face them. Making no choice is sometimes a choice you can make. It's not always the best one. And so I think part of the process of trying to set up, like you said, like an environment that is really beneficial for discussing QRPs is just to get that mindset in place to start with that you're going to have to face these challenges, right? You're going to have times where you have to make choices on how many conferences should you present at. 0, 1, 7, it's really up to you. Some of the QRPs, though, are a bit more on the they're closer on the negative side of things, right? Like things like p hacking, for example. It's kind of hard to argue there are times when that's going to be appropriate, though there are times where that might be closer to appropriate than not. So I think, yeah, probably can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's there. Yeah, and so yeah, I think setting that up as a first kind of a step of like just recognizing that these things do happen and that you're not necessarily a bad researcher or a bad scholar because you find yourself in a place where you have to make a tough decision. You're in that place because you're just doing research.
I think to build on that, so there's sort of this like individual level of recognition that we all make decisions and those decisions have ethical implications to them. But there's also kind of a more systematic way of looking at this and thinking about if I'm making a decision individually as a researcher, I also need to acknowledge that everybody else around me who are researchers are making these decisions. And so we should be talking about this when we are training our graduate students, when we're mentoring people, when we're working with others, when we're reviewing manuscripts, like all of the things that we do related to research work. I think there are opportunities to have conversations about how this is a normal, expected part of research. And if we can be transparent in the decisions we made and why we made them, somebody else might disagree with us, and that's okay. But I think just kind of like putting that part of research out there a little bit more, because sometimes when we see research articles, everything seems really cleaned up. It's like, oh, this all went perfectly. They got, this beautiful sample size, and everybody responded to all of the questions, and all of these things happened. That's very rarely the case, but if the only examples you see are these sort of like, I don't want to say sanitized version, but it's sort of like a best case version of a study, you're missing a lot of what's happening behind the scenes. And so I think if we don't talk to each other about this, especially when we're working with graduate students or people who are newer to research, it can be really easy to have this sort of false assumption that, oh yeah, everything's going perfectly for everybody else and nobody else is dealing with these issues. It must just be me. And that's like the farthest thing from the case. We all are dealing with these issues of researcher decisions. So
Totally true. And I'll just add that throughout the process that we've been doing this and we've given now, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 different talks at conferences and workshops and things like that. We always try to put forward the message that we're not like the mat. We haven't figured this all out yet. We're not, it's not like, and we're certainly not pointing fingers at other people saying, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this bad. We're the first ones to admit that we've encountered and maybe engaged in, many, if not most of these QRPs ourselves at some point. So it's not that we have it all figured out. We're still trying to do that.
Definitely. And that kind of flows us right into the next question of, do you think awareness of QRPs is improving in applied linguistics, or is there still resistance to discussing these issues openly?
the awareness is building, certainly. I mean, we recently just put out a special issue in the Journal of Second Language Studies on QRPs, which I think is the first of its kind. But we had, research studies that were related to QRPs that brought in a lot of different and valuable perspectives. So, I mean, I guess the rest of the group could chime in on this, but my perspective is that. If we approach this just as more of a conversation, we're going to talk about it. We're not here to judge you, as Luke mentioned. Like, we're not the ethics police. We don't have this all figured out. We just want to sort of give people space to talk about these things. I think that approach has been helpful. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of opportunities to continue talking about this and continue raising awareness.
Yeah, we gave I guess it was a workshop, we could call it, last spring at our big American Association of Applied Linguistics conference. And it was over a lunch session, and we didn't actually provide lunch. And we still had, what, 60 people in attendance, which is pretty good for all things considered. And so I think it is a topic that people do care about. And I don't know if I'd say it's becoming mainstream per se, but it's definitely a topic that I hear about and I see citations and things happening and discussions happening.
Definitely cool to hear because it's important to talk about these things and to be interested in developing the research as well. How do you think, or how do you hope addressing questionable research practices in applied linguistics contributes to a larger cultural shift in research ethics and transparency?
I'd say, yeah, to me, the book is certainly part of that movement. And I would, if anybody hasn't checked it out, we wrote a paper in 2023. Kate led on this paper. It's Yaw et al. 2023 in language teaching. And that was sort of a timeline of research ethics. And to me, this sort of fits in a natural trajectory. Scott, you've been involved in a lot of the work on research ethics over the last 10 or so years. And there's been a lot, I think sounds like on the surface like the most boring topic, but we found it to be actually really exciting and really cool. And there's so many things that we sort of that sort of fall under this sort of broad view of ethics. And some of us have taken on the view that like of kind of methods as ethics. So methodological decisions sort of as ethical decisions. So for us, the development in methodological literacy in the field and this notion of study quality and related things are intimately tied to the decisions that we make about research ethics as well.
It seems like this relates to, I mean, sort of the growing open science movement in our field. I mean, certainly like Applied Linguistics Press as, a project is contributing to that. But just this idea of methodological transparency and including these decisions that we're making, but also as we're including these, reflecting on what are the ethical implications of the decisions that we made as a researcher? How does this influence um, the outcomes of our study, the participants who are involved in the research itself. I think especially on the quantitative side, it's really important for us to be um, aware of this because when we think about quantitative research methods, we may assume like, oh, there's just a formula that you follow. This is the procedure for running a multiple regression or something like that. But a lot of our work still involves humans who provide language data or other types of data. And as researchers, we're making decisions that influence those people, but also influence the research itself, the outcomes of this. And so I think being more transparent about that is really important. And that's one thing that the broader open science movement has really contributed to our field. And so it's exciting to kind of see these connections between some of the work that we've been doing on the ethics side, and then also a lot of the really great work that has been happening on the open science side.
Yeah, and again, that kind of leads into my next question. But as a group, what made you all decide to publish this book through Applied Linguistics Press?
I think one of the things we all sort of agree on as a group, I hope I'm not overstepping, is that we really believe in freedom of materials and accessible materials, that we want people to have the ability to go out and find these things and use them if they want. I think a lot of people are kind of still in a place where research ethics is often like maybe 1 week in your research methods class and then sort of discussed some other times. And so our hope is really that we have, if we put the materials out there, that maybe we can help develop that into maybe more of an ongoing conversation, which is again something that I think a lot of us in the group are doing now as well in our classes. We kind of integrate these sorts of conversations and discussions at multiple steps, either in research, either in classes, research methods classes, just other classes, or I think even in our our own like mentorship we do with students as well.
I'll just add also, sort of from the perspective of Applied Linguistics Press, that this book is a little bit non-traditional. It's relatively short. I don't know if anybody knows exactly the page count, but I think we're maybe around 100 pages, something like that. It's relatively short. It has lots of like multimedia materials attached and it's heavily hyperlinked throughout. And so it lives really well as a PDF. It can live, of course, in a hard copy format, but it kind of makes sense to have in a PDF form, which is what Applied Linguistics Press is doing right now. Stay tuned for print on demand options, but also other traditional commercial for-profit publishers might not have considered a book like this because it's really atypical in those respects in terms of the length, in terms of the format and the medium. So I'm not sure that we would have found a lot of success with a commercial publisher anyway. Or they might not have. They might have said, "Well, this doesn't look and feel like a typical textbook," and it's not. So that was really that really it fit well with the flexibility of ALP as well.
Okay, and since publication of this book, what kind of feedback have you received from readers or colleagues, and have any of those responses surprised you?
I don't know. This is something we should look into more. I'm not sure that we have a lot of direct feedback, which is common. Textbooks don't often get a lot of direct commentary feedback from the faculty that use them. But we should put out we should look into this. We should look and see who's using it, how they're using it, if there's ways that we can improve it. what have the students, how the students that have seen it perceived it. Yeah, certainly something to look into. I'm not sure. Does anybody else have any input or feedback?
I guess somebody's watching, whoever's watching this video, just send us some feedback. If you watch the video, then you use the book. This is a good place. I guess.
Yeah, sure. We haven't even, I mean, Tuve Larson, one of our co-authors, she has used it for sure in her classes. And so we should, because she teaches Introduction to Research Methods here in the Applied Linguistics program at NEU. So we should ask her what's working and what's maybe not working so well for her and her students.
I think we've had an opportunity to get feedback on some parts of it that we've also used in some of our workshops. Like Scott mentioned, the lunchtime training workshop that we had at AAAL last year. And it I think one of the features that has been very popular in those sorts of group settings has been the scenarios that are included in the textbook. So where we sort of give a situation that may have one or more QRPs going on, but often there's not one right answer for sort of how to proceed or sort of what the best decision is necessarily. Um, and so that has been really effective for us in these sort of group settings where people get to discuss what's going on in the scenario. How might you approach this? You know, what are the implications of different possible decisions here? Um, and so I think sort of from that perspective, at least for that part of the book, the feedback has been generally positive. But I would agree with Scott and Luke that it would be really great to hear from anybody who's used this in their courses or just in any of their work, how it's been going for them.
Definitely. And then kind of on to the last question. Is there any particular takeaway or idea you hope lingers with your readers after finishing the book?
I guess just how cool this topic is and fun. Like it's a thing that I think, again, the three of us all I think agree on that it's really cool to talk about. And I think Luke mentioned earlier, it's not always the coolest topic out there sometimes. The number of times that I've tried to explain to my students, like, oh, here's my research, and you get like the stares, like, mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe reading the book and yeah, I think it's really fun.
And for the whole, I mean, the theme, one of the themes for me, the idea is that the key takeaways is just that these decisions are all around us, and it's best that they're difficult as researchers to deal with, and what we need to do is what we try to do with this book and the larger project, just keep that conversation going. Let's just be open about the difficulties and the decisions that we make along the way, rather than try to, as Kate was sort of describing it earlier, try and present like this nice, clean, tidy view of the way your research is, because it's not often that way. It's often kind of a messy process. So sort of just embracing that reality.
Yeah, I think considering the impact of the decisions that we make, and approaching that not from a feeling of like, oh, if I do this, it's completely unethical. Like, I don't, I guess I would want readers not to come away with this like overwhelming fear of if I make these decisions, it's gonna, somehow put me on the radar of, something negative, like ethics police, anything. Like, I don't think that that's particularly helpful. And in a lot of cases, it's not even accurate because a lot of these decisions, as Scott mentioned earlier, could be considered more or less ethical depending on the context, depending on like other information that really only the researcher has access to. And so I think just kind of letting people know like it's okay to reflect on these decisions, but don't let sort of like this feeling, this I don't know, a view of like ethics as something to be scared of stop you from engaging in these conversations and engaging in reflection along the way.
Yeah, I think just maybe one more is that it matters, right? That research ethics matters, that the decisions we're making, they matter. These topics, these discussions we're having, that, these are worth our time. Like I said, as teachers, as mentors, whatever it is our roles are, that again, this is important information. And so again, I think that's a great thing from the press that, they put the book out. That also gives it some amount of validity, right? That this is a thing that is important enough for people to read. And so I think, again, that's a pretty big takeaway, I think, from the book.
Yeah, thank you. those were all of the questions we had for you today. Was there anything else that you think we might have missed or you want to talk about with the book or just things you're working on now in general?
Okay, you want to mention next steps?
Yeah, so we as a group are continuing forward. Um, we had so much fun with with this project that we submitted a proposal for a follow-up project that was accepted. So we're going to be doing an NSF-funded project starting very soon, looking at questionable research practices related to generative AI use in the context of academic publishing. So, thinking about from the perspective of journal authors, peer reviewers, and editors, how are people using generative AI and how do we sort of feel as a scientific community about the ethicality of those uses. So that's something that we'll be working on for the next year, and then hopefully, this will build into a larger project as well. Our first step is to look at a sort of a taxonomy of questionable research practices related to generative AI use in academic publishing. But ideally, we would have the opportunity in the future to, kind of follow a similar trajectory to what we've done before, where we sort of like survey the field and then build materials and resources for others who need to make decisions about generative AI use. And we're excited about this because it's not just about sort of individual researchers at this point. It's also about sort of the other hats that we might wear as academics when it comes to research. And so we're really looking forward to kind of expanding out in that direction.
That's so exciting to hear you guys are continuing this and you're going to be talking about such a timely topic that is very relevant today. So, yeah, that's super cool. Well, thank you so much, Scott, Kate, and Luke. Thank you for giving us your time this morning. It was really great getting to talk and to hear about your book. And I hope you guys have a nice rest of your day.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thank you.